My name is Alberta McCrory, and I'm from the town of Hobson City, Alabama. And my occupation is mayor of the town of Hobson City, and I'm responsible for the day-to-day operation of the city, and that includes overseeing the employees, overseeing different departments that we have in the city, our library, our senior center, our maintenance department, and partial parks and recreation department. And I say partial because we are not fully uh, operational as far as parks and recreation is concerned. But we have our parks in the community. We have one park, which is the oldest park in an African American community in the country, and that's here in Hobson City. So we do have one park that's part of the recreation, parks and recreation department.
When I say Hobson City, Alabama, what comes to mind for you?
Hobson City, what comes to mind is my growing up in a city that was all Black. And at that time, we had a whole lot more resources than what we have now. We had a swimming pool that was very important to the kids in the community during the summer months, like now. And to know that we were a city, or that we are a city that is managed and governed by Black people. So I grew up during the heyday of the Jim Crow era, when Blacks were not elected to offices in other cities, with the exception of Hobson City, because it is the first incorporated all Black city in Alabama. And that came about in 1899. So a city that's independent, a city where Black people are determining for themselves which direction they want to go in, and a place where we could live in harmony. We have 4 churches in the community. I grew up with 5 churches in the community. One is no longer here. And those churches being very much a part of the community, and having families that were really connected to each other throughout the community, that formed the basis for helping to raise all of the children in the community, and other parents and all parents being responsible for every child in the community. And of course, the school where we are now, which is the school that I attended as a child, which is very important to me during my early childhood days here in Hobson City.
Would you explain the history of Maury Quarters?
Uncle Maury Quarter was a Black settlement. Uh, African Americans lived in this Black settlement in the Oxford area. And I believe it may have been in 1893 that Blacks elected a justice of the peace, because some Blacks did vote even then. And there were some whites who were outraged about this. And so one white guy who was elected mayor of Oxford said that he would go to Montgomery and have the boundary lines redrawn that would exclude the people in Morris Quarter from Hobson City. And he did do that. And so the people were out in the county for a long time. And at some point, they approached the clerk of courts in Anniston, and they also got them a lawyer who advised them to incorporate themselves. And of course, I want to believe that the lawyer did not tell them to incorporate, that they had already made up their minds that they were going to incorporate and become a separate municipality. And so they did that, and Hobson City became a separate municipality in 1899. And I believe it was the New York Times that printed an article about it in their newspaper. And it said that something to the fact that it was a project, and they would see how long it would last. And of course, this is 2019, and we are celebrating 120 years of living here in Hobson City, and of Hobson City continuing in spite of all of the challenges and the barriers that we've had to face, that we still exist.
Who was C.E. Hanna? What was his contributions to the Hobson City community?
As a child, I knew Professor C. Hanna When I started the school, I don't believe he was still the principal at that time. I was so young, I don't remember. I'll have to go back and let you know that. But I do remember him quite well because he lived in the community and he went to church in the community. He was a member of New Hope Baptist Church, and I was a member of that church as a child. So I remember Professor Hanna walking throughout the community, and we would see him, engaging people along the way. He always had his umbrella with him. So everybody knew him, as the teacher, as the professor. We always called him Professor Hanna. Very dignified man, and always very pleasant. So, and he left a lasting impression on a lot of students who went to him because one of the things that he required was that they attend church on Sunday. And he would want to know on Monday who had gone to church. This is what I hear from some of the older students who had him as a teacher. So he had a great impact on this community. And the fact that he lived in this community. And then we had other teachers who lived in this community. And we had business owners in this community. So it was not unusual for us to, walk down the street with the man that owned the dry cleaners or the first grade teacher or the fifth grade teacher, some of the teachers that lived in the community.
What were some of your experiences as a student at Calhoun County Training School?
The thing that I remember is having teachers who cared about me, who wanted me to learn and encouraged me to learn, and that reinforced what I was taught at home. Before I started first grade, I remember, my mother teaching me the numbers, teaching me alphabets, and we had kindergartens in our community. And so I went to kindergarten before coming here to first grade. And I remember being so sad when I got past elementary school and learned that you didn't get a nap in the morning and in the afternoon, that you had to spend that time uh, studying more so than napping. So, and the things that we were exposed to, we didn't know that it was different than what they were being taught in other schools. But we were always taught to do our very best. And we do know that students from this school went on to graduate from high school and go to colleges all over this country, including some of the colleges that, had been traditionally closed to Black people. So it was a very good school, and we had very good teachers. And they provided us with the best opportunities that they could provide us with at that time.
What were your initial thoughts when you discovered that the Calhoun County Training School was closing in 1972?
Sad, even though that full integration came along then, but we had freedom of choice before then. Freedom of choice that came about in the late 60s. And I know some of my friends who went to white schools, uh, our last year in high school, which was 65, 66. And so it was a sense of losing all of those things that the school and community had, such ties together. All of the people in the community would come to the school for different events. Each year we had a choral recital. We had one in the spring, and then we would have a musical during the Christmas. And then your baccalaureate and graduation were always very important events in the life of the community and the schools. And because we were a feeder school, we had students from other communities who came here to go to school. And so all of those people would gather together and come here and meet on that Sunday afternoon, or when we had the graduation ceremony, or on that evening that we had was when we had the baccalaureate and then had the graduation. You would have people from from miles around, because graduation was a big event in the African American community, to have your child to graduate from high school. And so kids didn't fall through the crack as some of them are doing now. And there was no such thing as a child that could not learn, because our teachers just instilled in us a desire to learn. And so most of the people that I started out first grade with, they were in my 12th grade class. They didn't fall through the crack. It was no, whatever social problems or poverty and all those things, those other ills that we were confronted with, they didn't, although they were part of our daily lives, we didn't let that be priority with us. So we made an effort along with our teachers and our families to, to make things better. And that was why we were here, and to make the best of the opportunity that we had to learn so that we could have a better life later on.
What was to be expected as a Black person visiting downtown Anniston, Alabama during Jim Crow?
I remember specifically going to stores that served food or sold food. And I had a cousin whose name was Nancy, one of my older cousins. And she would only buy in one store that sold food. And the only reason she bought food in that store was because we had a cousin who was the custodian or handyman that worked in that store. But stores like Woolworth and W.T. Grant, they sold hamburgers, hot dogs, Cokes and the fries, things like that. And they didn't serve blacks at the counter. You could go in and purchase, make your purchase, and you had to stand at the end of the counter to do that. And when they did decide to wait on you, you could not sit there and eat what you had purchased. You had to take it with you. So I was taught early on not to uh, patronize those places, not to buy from those places if they would not serve you food. And so I remember the black and white water fountains in those stores. And when I did get old enough and participated in the civil rights marches and demonstrations, my friends and I went to those same places and sat down at the counter. We never went to jail. And fortunate for us, sometimes a group from Cobb Avenue High School would have gone down before we got there. That happened a couple of times. And then I remember another time my girlfriend and I went to a place. And when I think about it, we were really, had not it been for the black people who worked there, we really could have put ourselves in danger, because you had to go into the bakery, which was at the front, and then you had to go through a door into the dining area. And this gentleman by the name of Jimmy Gardner had done the same thing as Lester Maddox, in terms of Lester Maddox ran people out of his restaurant in Atlanta with an axe hammer or handle or an axe. And so Jimmy Gardner, didn't want black people in his place, even though he had blacks who were, worked there for him. So, so I had my share of going places and integrating lunch counters and movie theaters and churches uh, when I was in high school, and working as part of what became the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. At that time, it was the Calhoun County Improvement Association. And so, the young people were very much involved in what went on during that time.
Integration caused Hobson City's economic and social decline. Do you agree?
I absolutely do. One of the key things we did not realize, I don't think at that time, the magnitude of losing this school and what it meant to this community with the loss of the school. And so you don't have the kids in the community all day long, but they have, been bussed into another community. And then this businesses, even though they may have been small businesses that existed in the city, there was a store that was a couple of blocks maybe from the school to the right, and a couple of stores down the street to the left. And so those people depended on those students coming by to make purchases, whether it's chips, sodas, or what have you. And then the parents, making purchases, people living in the community. After integration, people were able to go where they wanted to go and make purchases where they wanted to. Uh, we saw a decline, and we just, I guess, never anticipated, you know, the amount of damage that integration would do to the community and to our families as a whole. And with the integration and kids going to a different school, not necessarily to a different school, but then, graduating and doors being opened up for them in other places. So a lot of the kids left here and did not come back. And so with jobs being made available, and we didn't have a lot of jobs uh, in this area at that time. And most of the young men could only hope to maybe land a job at the foundry. Some of them went into the military, and some of them were drafted because the war was going on, and so that played a big part in just there's so many connecting pieces with what went on to help uh, the demise, I would say, or almost demise of Hobson City. So you had all these little pieces and people moving away and not coming back home after college or serving in the military, things like that, going to other places where they could purchase better homes, because we also have a serious problem with banks not loaning money in this community to people to purchase homes or to build a home. And so when you don't see that building taking place, and it's not because people don't have the credit, and it's not because they don't have the money, it's because of the bank's policy and the racism that exists in the banking industry that helps uh, with the demise of small communities like ours. And maybe not just small communities, but African American communities as a whole.
What are some events that need to take place to revitalize the Hobson City community?
First of all, I think the people in the community, you know, we talk individually about Hobson City, and every once in a while you hear people talking about, how proud they are of Hobson City. But I think those people have to stop talking about that pride and start coming together to work to make some things happen for Hobson City. To stop, I think people need to understand the full story. Because when you talk to people, for the most part, all they know is that Hobson City is an all black city. It's the oldest black city in Alabama. But yeah, what about being the oldest black city in Alabama? What does that mean to you? And what does that mean now? People are sitting back now waiting for something to happen, but nothing is going to happen until we get together as a people and talk about what it is that we want to make happen for Hobson City. I would like to see a better looking Hobson City. When you ride into Hobson City, you see the abandoned buildings just as you enter into the building. I mean, into the city. You see homes that are not kept. And those were not the kinds of things that we grew up with in Hobson City. When I grew up, there were no vacant homes in Hobson City. There were no abandoned homes and boarded up homes. There were no 2.5 families or 2.5 children in a home. Everybody had 5 or 6 children. And we know people are not doing that anymore. But people have to be willing to invest in their own community. And when I say invest, I'm talking about time. I'm talking about coming to the council meetings. I'm talking about seeing what it is that goes on in the council meeting, the things that the mayor and the council struggle with every day that the average person has no clue. Uh, Even when it comes to some simple things like picking up the trash, we still have our sanitation department. It's one of the few departments that we have left that we have a little control over. But then we have people who don't want to pay sanitation bill. They say it's just trash. It's just sanitation. But we have to pay the landfill when we go to the landfill. We have to pay the young men for picking up the trash. We have to pay uh, not only their salaries, but then we have to pay the insurance if they get hurt out there on the truck. So we're not talking about just $11. And I'd like to see the people just really get more involved in trying and talking about what we need. We talk about economic development, but what does that economic development look like? What is it, for you? And so we talk about things. There are some things that have to happen, and we have to have money. It takes money to do anything that you're going to do. And so, and this money is not going to come just from the federal government. We don't know what's out there in terms of what's available from the federal government. We know some grants are out there as far as water and sewer, but we also have to look for some private partners. And then those of us who have some disposable income, we have to be willing to invest in some things in this community. I'd like to see some people get together and buy up some of these abandoned houses and restore them. I'd like to see some people come together. We talk about putting a brokerage firm together for Hobson City. Instead of criticizing and talking about it's not going to work, get in there and make it work. We have not done all that we can do ourselves except for talk. And I've reached that point after, especially this being my third term in office, that we've tried to put all the little pieces that we could put together so that we can move forward. We don't owe a bank anything in Hobson City. When we came on board in 2008, we owed over $200,000 to a bank. We owed over $115,000 to our water provider. And we paid off all of those loans. We have not used loans to help us with the day-to-day operation of the city. We cut back on the hours of the city. We don't work on Fridays. We cut back on those things that we could cut back on so that we could clear some money to have to do some things with, but we're still not in the clear yet. We'll have our Founders Day. We do the third week in August every year. And when you see people all around you having big events, and all the banks and the car lots and the dealerships and all, they purchase ads or they sponsor that event. Well, people in Hobson City drive Fords and Chevrolets and BMWs and everything else, but you don't see any of them supporting us. And it's not because we have not asked. You know, the banks, uh, we have banks, the city does business with the bank, but do you think they support anything that we do? Absolutely not. So until you want to be inclusive and stop dodging and doing what your predecessors did, and make a difference to help all of us, uh, then you'll have places like Hobson City. But we don't intend to stay in this spot forever. We know what the problems are, and we're going to approach these problems head on. We want to expose some people. This is what has to happen.
What caused Hobson City's economic issues in the 1970s and the 1980s?
Okay, let me just go back to the 70s because I ran for mayor of Hobson City for the first time in 1972 when I think about 25 years old. But Mayor Stringer became mayor of Hobson City, I believe in 1972. Um, and he hired a city planner who had graduated from Tuskegee uh, University, maybe in still Tuskegee Institute. He also was able to hire some people through what they called the CETA program at that time. And very progressive, doing a lot of things. But at that time, we did not realize just how competitive and political grants were. So Hobson City was able to get, I know, one big grant that they were able to build a new city hall with. And when I say new city hall, a city hall, because the city had never had a city hall. We operated out of the old Masonic building in Hobson City. So I think it was, again, racism and being political that really stopped, uh, just almost brought to a halt the progress that was being made in Hobson City. Because I think we went like from 72, uh, early part of 76, and maybe the middle part of 76 in terms of political terms of elected officials, is when the mayor at that time came under fire with a lot of legal issues. And if you really go back and look, on the surface, it may look like the person was doing a lot of wrong. They were just trying to make Hobson City work because they knew that the white people were not going to help Hobson City. And maybe they did not have people with the skill sets to do all that they needed, but that was what they were doing. They were getting people with the skill sets, getting some people from Alabama A&M who had just graduated with their degree in planning and some other areas, and getting some young people in here with some skills who could help them make some things happen. And so when you look at that, You see that it wasn't all that the people didn't know. Here you are with a city where you have not had Black people uh, to be able to go and work in a city government in other cities. And so you're here by yourself and you've got to kind of navigate through all that stuff by yourself. And then, so when you find your own way of doing things, and then you have people coming to you afterwards saying, you've done it all wrong, and this is illegal, or this is unethical. When all they were trying to do was trying to find a way to make things work for this city. I believe that wholeheartedly now, after stepping back and looking at how things have happened, not only then, but since then. And then one day I had a 6-hour long talk with Judge L. Stringer, who was the mayor during that time. He stopped long enough to take his daughter to work at one of the fast food places. She was in high school at the time. And he just told me all about, and I have it on tape, all about some of the challenges that he faced and they faced. And of course, he had to go to the governor to get help from the governor. And he went places and he met people and he got people interested in coming to Hobson City, like James Brown and Hank Aaron, to put the spotlight on Hobson City. And so I think that was that scare that Hobson City really was going to get out of the gate. And they had to stop Hobson City. And Hobson City has not flourished since that time.
The question of incorporation status has been a burden of the community. It just has been a situation in its own. What are your thoughts on the situation of how we possibly had lost our incorporation or whatever case may be?
We didn't lose it. It wasn't lost. The white folks abolished it. The people in power abolished the charter. And so so I'm glad that people in Hobson City decided that we don't care what you do. We're just a few years from slavery, and we're not going back there anymore. So we're going to keep on. We've established our own. We're going to have our own. We're going to keep on working it. And so they kept on working it. They kept on working it. And so when we came to the point last year in January where we had to get Dr. Barbara Boyd to present a bill to the legislature, and that was after we learned, after having some young men, one from Louisiana and one from Texas, to come here and look at Hobson City to see how they may be able to help. One is a builder. He's built a lot of houses in the Louisiana area. Wanted to come and help Hobson City, and found out that we didn't have empowerment zones or distressed neighborhood zones, historical underserved business zones. Just all of that was just wiped. Was just never even considered in this area. And I don't know if some of my previous mayors didn't know this or did not have things made available to them. And so when we learned that this is what this means to us now, that if you don't have this, then you can't get that. And if so that was why it was so important to go back and get Hobson City, whatever it took to abolish it, to get that erased and get this city established as a city without any loss of services as a city, and so that we could continue to exist.